I just got a notification saying we're being live streamed. Should we start?
I got that notification.
Okay. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining another episode of BIMS Dives. Today we'll be diving into science communication with Jaida Elcock. I am Janelle Layton, a current graduate student at Oregon State University studying fishery science. And our next moderator is Jamone.
Yo, I'm Jamone. I am also at Oregon State University. I am studying marine resource management. My research focuses on swordfish and habitat distribution.
And today we're going to be joined by Jaida Elcock. And Jaida is a PhD student in the MIT Hui Joint Program. Her research is on shark movement ecology of migratory elasmobranchs. In 2022, Jaida was awarded the Dr. Nancy Foster Scholarship to support her during her time in her PhD program. Jaida received her BS in biology with university honors from Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff, Arizona. She has previously lived in landlocked states, but still has been able to gain experience with marine animals through an internship at Odyssey Aquarium in Scottsdale, Arizona. Jaida is an avid science communicator across social media platforms and enjoys spreading her love of marine sciences to all who will listen. Jaida is incredibly excited to help others underrepresented students light a fire within themselves to fuel a passion for marine sciences. So
some of y'all might hear as sophistication.
Sophistication. Yep, that's me.
Yep. So earlier today, we asked our audience members over social media, why is science communication so important? At the end of our chat, we'll go over a couple of those answers. But for now, can you tell us why science communication is so important for you, Jaida?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to say thanks for having me. Excited to be here. Science communication for me, I think, is so important because it kind of helps to bridge the gap between the public and science. And I feel like, especially in recent times, there's been some distrust between the public and science. And I think it's really important for scientists to be transparent and say, look at all this amazing work that we're doing. Not only is it like fun for us, but also really interesting and impactful on the lives that we all live. So being able to kind of convey that information, whether it be super scientific or just like, some goofy fun, like, here, look at this weird animal. I think all of those things are really important because it's important to have an educated public, but it's also, a way to connect as people as well and, come together and learn about something new together. And I think that that's really important.
Do you think your experience in science communication has helped you develop professionally as well?
I would say so. I think that it as a scientist, like, we have to go and present our research, like, especially at like conferences and stuff like that. And presenting research can be really difficult. There's like a lot of jargon and really complex concepts that are really difficult to understand if you aren't actively studying it all the time. I know I read papers sometimes and I have to reread them again because even though I'm in the field, I still didn't understand it. So being able to get practice with communicating with people who aren't in my field, I think really helps to be able to communicate the more complex and harder to digest science as well. So I think it's kind of helped me out professionally in that way.
Yes. And can you tell us a bit more about your work in minorities in shark science, or MIS?
Absolutely. So I am one of the co-founders and also the director of public relations for MIS. We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting gender minorities of color in the field of shark science. So this all started because, it's difficult to be in a room full of your colleagues and realize you're the only person that looks like you. And so when we found the other co-founders, there's me, Amani Weber-Schultz, Jasmine Graham, and Carly Jackson Bohannon. When the four of us found each other on Twitter, it was like this moment of like, oh my gosh, there's more. Like, it's not just me. I'm not the only like Black person studying sharks. There's more of us out there. And it gave us the opportunity to kind of connect like with each other, and then also to create a community for other gender minorities of color as well, all over the world, and create a community of us so that we can, feel accepted and welcomed, be the representation that we wish that we saw when we were kids, and also have a platform for us to be able to share all of this amazing research that's going on within our community.
You talk about being the platform, and growing up, I remember watching like a lot of shark, not necessarily research all the time, but documentaries and seeing them get tagged and stuff. And obviously no one on TV looks like any of us in this call. But when I talk to our community, my family, is a lot of fear, a fear around sharks, and why would we study them? I mean, Jaws is a big reason why we have this even to this day in our society. But how do you deal with navigating fear of sharks and even the ocean? Because there's a lot of phobia and trauma with the ocean and our community.
Absolutely. So I think sharks in general, I think that fear comes from, in addition to trauma, unknown as well. When we don't know about something, we are just inherently more afraid of it. That's just how we work evolutionarily, and it makes a lot of sense. So I don't blame anyone for being afraid of things that they're not necessarily familiar with. So I think the way that I kind of combat that is just with more information. I actually grew up being afraid of sharks. Because I didn't know enough about them. I was like, oh, if I go in the ocean, I'm going to get bitten by a shark and I'm going to die. And I was terrified of them. And the more I learned, like, oh, the chances of that happening are incredibly low. Learning more about how important they are for our ecosystems and what our oceans would look like if they kind of just disappeared, things would start to be thrown out of whack, and we wouldn't really have the balance that we need to have a healthy ocean ecosystem anymore. So just learning all of those things, I think, really helped me to dispel my own fear. And so having that experience of trying to get over that fear myself, I think kind of helps inform my science communication and how I approach other people when they express to me like, oh no, I'm afraid of the ocean, or I'm afraid of sharks. Being able to say, oh, I was there at that point as well. These are some of the things that helped me to kind of get past that fear. And I don't think that fear of wildlife or fear of the ocean is necessarily always negative. I think that maybe it just means that there are people that are reluctant to engage with that, and are more comfortable, standing on the sidelines and letting other people do that. And that's totally fine. I just like to say that we have to make sure that we're not letting fear get in the way of respect, because the ocean and the sharks deserve our respect. They've been here for way longer than we have. They're super important to our ecosystems. The ocean is obviously essential to the way our planet functions as a planet. And so being able to, not necessarily be fearless, but work through the fear enough to where we can keep the respect, I think, is an important thing.
I like that. I haven't really thought of it that way in terms of balancing fear and respect. Yeah, that's I'm going to keep that in mind.
And so we hit like a lot of different topics, I feel like, already, not just science communication. How do you balance all of it between the science, grad school, the science communication, social media, content creation? How does that work for you?
Yeah, because I've seen you on my feed on TikTok. I'm like, oh, there she goes again. Like,
TikTok, Instagram, Twitter,
yeah.
everywhere.
Hank Green is shouting you out. I'm like, oh.
Yeah. That was wild to me when that happened. I was like, it's funny because I was like, I grew up watching Hank Green. I told the other co-founders of Miss about it. Amani was so excited and she was like, oh my gosh, no way. And Carly and Jasmine were both like, who is that? And that's when we realized that the four of us did not we didn't go to high school at the same time. It's like Carly and
Oh,
Jessica, and then me and Amani afterwards. It was really funny. But that balance, I think, is very different for everyone. And it's also, I think it depends on, time of year, what else is happening. Like it's constantly changing. It's a very dynamic balance. For me at the moment, I'm currently getting ready for like my qualifying exam. So I'm writing a research proposal and I'm doing a lot of studying. And so I have less time for science communication at the moment. Which, you know, good, bad, or indifferent. I don't know. It depends on who you are. I think that it's important to have the balance so that you're not letting other things in your life like fall to the side. But it is really hard because there's so many hats that we wear, and you kind of have to try and wear them all at the same time or at the right time or whatever it is. And I think that that balance is something that I and many other science communicators and just everyone everywhere kind of struggles with, no matter what your job is or what you do in your free time or whatever. The way that I do it is I kind of try to just do all of my science communication on the weekends, and I'll have videos like drafted, and I'll draft all these videos on Sunday and then I'll post them throughout the week. If I have a moment throughout the week and I'm like, oh, there's a trend going around, let me just use this TikTok sound, then I'll just like make a quick video using that too. But I try to keep it mostly on the weekends, especially right now, because like I said, I'm preparing for this exam. So during the week, I want to focus as much as I can on research and writing and studying, and use more of like my downtime on the weekends. My me time is like some of my science communication time, because it is something that I really enjoy, and I learn more about the ocean and whatever wildlife I'm talking about. I learn more about that through science communication. So it's fun to be able to learn with my audience as well. But because I love learning and it's something that I've always really enjoyed, like it doesn't necessarily feel like work all the time if I'm doing it during my downtime as well. So that's kind of how I balance it a little bit. I try to get out like 2 or 3 videos a week, and sometimes I only get 1. Sometimes I'm able to make 4. It just kind of depends on the week and what else is going on. And if it works out, I can get more videos out. Fantastic. And if it doesn't, oh, well, try again next week. It's always a balance. And I think that it's important to not let like imposter syndrome or fear of like becoming irrelevant in like 2.5 days, like get in the way of you, trying to keep the balance that you need and doing your science communication when you have the chance to do it.
So what you're saying is you keep your fans on their toes.
Yeah, I'm like, I would love to be like, I post on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And I'm like, no, I'll post on Sunday, probably in the evening. I might post on Wednesday. It might be Thursday. I don't know. I meant to post a TikTok yesterday, actually, and I posted it today and said, I was like, you'll get a video when you get one. I don't know.
Yeah. And, like taking care of yourself, I think that's the best way to go about it, because especially knowing how dynamic and unpredictable our duties as grad students can be at times. So I think batch creating is a good approach. But you have cultivated a good sized audience. Like, how does that? Do you think about that? Like, were you expecting to grow as large of a following as you have?
I definitely wasn't expecting it. When I started all of this, I think it was like January of 2020. For the longest time, I was like, I refuse to download TikTok. I'm not doing it. Vine was better. I'm not doing it. All these like little musically dances and whatnot. And then I was like, okay, I'm bored. I'm going to download it. And so I did it. And my friends were like, you should post videos. And I was like, yeah, I mean, everyone's got like a thing on TikTok. Like there are artists who like draw companies as people. And then there's like choreographers that like do really cool dances and whatever else. And I was like, I like to talk a lot. And also I know a bunch about animals. So like, what if I just talk about animals? And then I started putting them on Twitter X with the from the advice of one of my friends. She was like, you should totally put this on Twitter. People would get a kick out of it. And I was like, sure, okay. So I did. And then that was like my first like audience explosion, was like I got like a ton of followers on Twitter. And I just was not expecting it. I was just like, well, I'm just some nerd on the internet is like, here are animal facts, I guess. I don't know. I think part of the reason I was able to do that was because of the pandemic, because very soon after that, the pandemic hit. And what else was I going to do? I made a video like every day for a couple months because I was like, we're all locked inside and we need some joy. So I'm going to do this because I'm bored and I hope that it brings you joy. And it just kind of started growing from there because everyone was online. But I also think that I feel like I worked really hard to get the audience as well. So it grew first on Twitter, and then it grew even bigger on TikTok. I think I have it was like 27,000 or something like that on Twitter. And then I got like 45,000 or something like that on TikTok. And then more recently, now I have like 57,000 on Instagram. And I was like, I don't even know. I feel like one video on each of those platforms like really takes off, and then you just get like a gazillion followers from that. And I'm like, hey, I'll take it. If you guys want to join me on this wacky journey of science communication, I'm happy to bring you all along. So that's kind of been my experience with it.
Nice. And how do you think science communication in person is super different than science communication via social media? Do you have to, present information differently in a sense?
That's interesting. I think that it obviously does have its differences. Like when I stumble over my words, or I'm like, let me double check this fact. When I'm doing it online, I'm like, okay, let me just move to Google rather than TikTok to like verify that I'm right on it. You know what I mean? Like it's so much easier. But I do really like in-person science communication because it's so much more personal, and you're standing in front of other people and you're like, look, interaction, amazing. Like we can see each other. It's great. I think that it gives them the chance to like ask more in-depth questions too. So I think that you can potentially get deeper science communication in person. But I guess it maybe just depends on your platform. I think that some social media allows for, I guess, better exchange of conversation than others. Like TikTok, that's not really possible. You have very limited space in what you can comment on a TikTok, and I can do my best to respond with it with a video. But if we're in person, you can ask me a 5-minute long question and I'll go off on a 20-minute rant to answer it for you, and I also think that it depends on who you are and how you go about your science communication. Because for me, I am the same person online as I am in person. And I realized that when I had asked my roommate about that, because he moved in a couple months ago and he apparently had followed me for a while and was like a fan of mine and was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm going to end up like meeting this person when I move to Woods Hole. And then he was like, oh my gosh, I'm actually going to be living in the same apartment as her. Like, this is crazy. And he basically was like, there was no like disconnect from your online persona to like your actual personality. Like I just was the same person. And I was like, I'm really glad that it comes across that way. But I think if you do science communication, if you have more of like a character online that's different from your personality, then I think that makes that transition a little bit more different. Or at least I would imagine so. I don't really have experience with that, but since I kind of keep it consistent and I'm just wild and loud and talk fast everywhere, I feel like it just is a pretty normal transition for me. But I'd love to do more in-person science communication. I haven't had the chance to do a ton of it just yet. But the things that I have done have been really fun. So I hope to do more.
Yeah, I think I definitely appreciate the sense of authenticity. So it's nice to know that you're confirming that is genuinely how you are.
Yeah, I try.
Do you,
There's a
considering
question in the chat, Jamon, real
oh,
quick.
there
We
is.
might have to,
Let's see. Oh, okay. We have a question from Alana Bellicott. Do you have a preferred post scheduling app?
Oh, I don't. Well, so for social media stuff, we use an app called Buffer. So if you're looking for an app, we've used that before. I've used it a couple of times. I like it. I just haven't transitioned myself personally for it. I just kind of manually do it, and it would be so much easier if I just used an app. So I might transition to Buffer. But that's the only one I have experience with, but it seems to be working because we're still using it. So
Janelle, do you have any more questions about SciComm specifically?
We can move on unless you have something you want to add.
Oh, I do. I just want to make
Okay,
sure.
go for it. Go.
Okay, cool. Do you think about like the impact that you're having? Because not to like, not necessarily in an egotistical sense, but the positive impact due to the sheer amount of reach you're able to have with your platforms. Like, have you been able to like acknowledge how many people you've inspired to actually pursue science? I mean, that's kind of what I feel like we all do here in BIMS is like we want to see more people like us in our fields. And I feel like when you have platforms like that and with your interpersonality or personability, it really makes people feel more comfortable taking a risk to like try out the types of stuff we do.
yeah, I do think about that sometimes. And I think that like as a science communicator or really anyone with a platform, I think that it's really important to keep in mind the impact that you do have or the impact that you can potentially have. I think that that could greatly inform, I guess, how you go about existing online. And everyone does it differently. And I'm not saying that there's any right or wrong way to do it. It just depends on who you are and what you want to show to people. I personally like that I have been able to impact families and like kids. I love kids. Like I was a babysitter, I was a nanny. I've got 4 nephews and a niece now. So I love interacting with kids and talking to kids about science. And so the fact that that's part of my audience is something that I really value. And I've gotten messages from parents being like, oh my gosh, my son, like he's Black and he loves sharks. And so we show him your videos and he's so excited to see someone like his skin tone. Yeah. Or I've seen like, I got a text from a friend who said like her nephew or her niece, like saw a video and was like, I didn't know that a scientist can also be pretty. And I was like, I'm going to cry. That is so like heartbreaking, but also so cute. Like, thank you so much. Wow, I'm pretty. Wow. But so I do like to think about that impact that I have sometimes because I didn't have that kind of representation growing up. Like I grew up watching like Steve Irwin and Jeff Corwin, and I love them. I have like, there's no negativity here whatsoever. Like I looked up to them. Yeah. And I still do look up to them. I have a stuffed animal from the day that I met Jeff Corwin when I was like 8 years old, and I treasure that thing. It's a frog. I have nothing to do with frogs, but I'm like, this thing is like my inspiration. And so it was nice to have those role models, but it also would have been really nice to see someone that looked like me. And I think that kind of the examples that I just gave, some little kids, if they don't see someone that looks like them, they don't know that that job is an option for them. I'm just stubborn and was like, I'm going to do whatever I want anyway, even if I don't see myself represented there. But there are a lot of little kids that need that representation to feel confident enough to say, I want to go into science, or I want to go into engineering, or whatever it is. And so it does make my heart really happy to know that people have been impacted by me in a positive way and have been able to see like, yeah, you can be a Black woman and do science. You can be a queer person and do science. You can have dreadlocks and do science. Like you can be whoever you want and do science, because science needs everyone to be successful and to be innovative and to be, important and discover new things and all these things. And so it is nice to kind of, especially when I'm feeling very like imposter syndrome-y, to kind of think back on some of those really kind messages people have sent me and recognize that I am doing something meaningful, even if it's just for one person or like one family or whatever. So, yeah.
That's so beautiful. Yeah. Touching on, childhood and growing up, you think that's a good pivoting point, Janelle, to go into some
going into background?
Yeah.
I came up with another question as we just had that conversation.
Okay.
Not to, I guess, make things more negative, but from my experience, there are always great positive comments, but there are also sometimes the negative ones. And How have you received those, and how do you navigate, the people that, may not be as nice or friendly on the internet as others?
Yeah, I've gotten racism, I've gotten sexism, I've gotten people being like, you're only 12, you don't know what you're talking about. I've kind of gotten it all, and I just simply ignore it. And sometimes it does get to you. It's impossible to say that those things never affect me in a negative way, because sometimes they do. That, I mean, when you see negative things being said about you, at some point it starts to hurt a little bit. But I think that the more, unfortunately, the more it happens, the more you get used to it. And then you're like, oh, these comments are completely useless to my life. They're not adding anything of value to myself or to the internet at large. And it gets a lot easier to kind of brush them aside. It's also helpful to have like a support network of, like your family and your friends who are like, no, you're doing amazing things. Or sometimes I'll be like, I can't believe that I just got this comment. LOL, look, this person is like so rude and doesn't know what they're talking about. And then my friends, Amani and I do this for each other. It's like, if she gets a negative comment or if I get a negative comment, it's like, oh my gosh, which post? I'm going to go clap back at this person for you. And that's always very nice to have like this little, because it's nice to have other science communication friends who get what you are going through and understand what it feels like to get those comments and be like, I got you. I have the perfect thing to say. But yeah, I've gotten comments like, oh, you're barely even Black. And I'm like, I'm also half white and I live in Massachusetts. In the wintertime, I get very pale. So like, it's going to be what it is. I'm still Black. I've gotten people being like, oh, women aren't strong enough to restrain a shark for tagging. Like, that's not even a thing. And I'm like, you commented this on a video of me actively, helping to restrain a shark while we tagged it. But sure, go off, man. Or people that are like, you're not a scientist, you're just a student. And I'm like, right, PhD student who's actively doing science. So a scientist, maybe you just don't understand how the scientific world works, and that's fine, but like maybe don't speak on it then. But it gets pretty easy to just come up with like a quick little like clap back or delete the comment or ignore it. And it gets annoying, but at some point I'm just like, I have more important things to do. I'm going to let my science communication and my science speak for itself. You can either block me or you can be mad about it. Or you can just come along for the ride and stop being bitter. Pick one. I choose the positive option.
Love that.
Yeah, it sounds like you got some tough skin, kind of like the sharks you study.
Yeah.
Yeah. We got a question in the chat. Let's see. This question is from Jamie, Jame, I think, McCrae. She says, your videos are remarkably creative. Love the riddles this past Shark Week. Can you talk about your creative process? How does this innovative bent manifest in other parts of your life?
Oh, that's such a good question. Also, thank you for the kind words. I think that I've always been a very creative person, but I'm not a very artistic person. So it's like I have fun ideas, but I don't know how to bring them to fruition in like a physical way. So like I'm not great at painting or like pottery or that kind of stuff. It's more of like
you're a visionary.
Thanks. Sure. I am creative, but not artistic. So I think the creativity comes out in ways that I think it seeps into like other aspects of my life. So with science communication, is like a riddle. Again, I talk a lot. I feel like at some point I've gotten decent with my words, comes and goes, depends on the day. So I think that allows me to kind of create little like rhymes and riddles about things. It also seeps into like the family aspect where all of my nieces and nephews have like food related nicknames that I've given them. There's like bean and roll and noodle and pasta and kiwi, like all of them.
That's
and it's
crazy.
funny because my nephew, the oldest one, picked up on it and was like, what are you going to nickname the newest baby? What's his nickname going to be? And I was like, fantastic question. His name is Roll immediately. I don't know. So these little like creative things, I think just like seep into other aspects of my life. And I think science communication is a really good outlet for the creativity that I have that I can't put into other things, if that makes sense. Maybe that's kind of confusing, but I guess that's kind of how it goes. And sometimes I'll just have brainstorming sessions with friends of like, I need a new video or like, I need a new video format, or like, I want to make a video about something like this, but I'm not sure how to go about it. And just someone being like, oh, how about this thought? Or how about that thought? And it just then, I think, sparks a whole new train of thinking, and it allows me to just kind of run with it. So if you are struggling with creativity, maybe sit down with some friends or some family and be like, here's my initial thought, word association. How can we build off of this? And that's something that I think is helpful as well, because I also have a lot of creative friends.
Jamie's funny. She said the riddles are poetry.
Thank you.
Did you have anything else, Jamie, you want to bring up with science communication?
I'm good.
Okay. Well, we know the subject is science communication, but we want to talk about sharks too, because
yeah, like I study basking sharks. That's so cool. That's like, yeah, let's talk about it, please.
Okay. So I guess first, can you tell us a bit more about your actual research, your graduate school research?
Yeah, so I'm going to be looking at probably focusing more on like basking sharks and whale sharks, but just broadly migration and like energetics of migration. So for an example, we've got basking sharks that can live out in Cape Cod up into like Canada, but then they migrate all the way down to like the Caribbean. And some have even gone past the equator. So they're going thousands and thousands of kilometers. And I like to describe that as like the marathon of all marathons. And your friends, if you ever have a marathon friend, you know, they're like carbo loading the day before. They're like, I'm eating pasta 3 days in a row, carbo loading. And so it kind of, I kind of just think about like, well, how do the sharks do that? If they're swimming this marathon of marathons, then how are they able to like fuel up for that? Or do they need to recover for it? How does that huge movement across an entire ocean basin like affect their body? So just kind of looking into the puzzle pieces, trying to put those puzzle pieces together of like, why are you doing this? How are you doing this? What areas are important for you to be able to get the resources you need to do this? And all those kinds of questions. And that kind of stuff can go forward to help us understand what areas could be better protected in order to protect a potentially like vulnerable or endangered species, and also help us understand how those places that are so important and how those resources that are so important are going to be affected as we continue to affect the ocean, as we continue to accelerate climate change.
That's really cool.
I've always you got it. I don't know, I'm geeking out. I'm a fish nerd, so I love anything.
Yeah, you said swordfish, and I was like, okay, I see you.
We talk later, yeah.
And so I guess, how did you get from growing up in a landlocked state, no ocean around you, to this amazing research that sounds so cool and like the dream job of so many people out there in the world?
Yeah, I think that it stemmed, like I said, how I kind of dispelled some of that fear within myself of just learning more. And so it's like the more I learned, the more questions I had, until the questions I had were like not answerable. Like there weren't any answers yet. And so I was like, I guess this is where you end up doing research. Because I'm like, why do basking sharks migrate? And everyone's like, we don't know. And I'm like, I'd like to find out. So then you just do it. You just go and figure it out. I'm like, I'm too curious about these questions to just be like, I'll wait for someone else to do it. So maybe that's kind of what it was, of just like curiosity killed the cat, but gave Jaida a career, I guess. I don't know.
I can relate to you a lot, because I didn't grow up in a landlocked state. I grew up in Georgia, but we never really went to the coast growing up. The only time I ever saw the beach is when I went to visit my family in Florida, like maybe once a year, if that.
Yeah.
And, you know, I still reflect on like how I ended up pursuing this career field, considering that. And I think for me, it was like a lot of exposure to like Steve Irwin, and I guess for James Cameron too. do you feel like your position at Landlocked State kind of fueled your desire and your curiosity more to become a marine scientist? Because that's kind of how it was for me.
Yeah, I think that was like a perfect, because this was something that I was like, I had in my head, but I hadn't said it out loud yet. And then you literally just teed me up to say this. But yes, I think that, growing up in landlocked states, I lived in Illinois for like 10 years. That's where I was born. And then I moved to Arizona. And so I was able to explore like the forests and grasslands or whatever, the cornfields of Arizona or of Illinois. And then I moved to Arizona, and my brothers and I were out there exploring like the desert and looking for snakes and lizards and spiders and scorpions and just trying to understand, like, what do you do? How do you exist in the world? And I didn't ever have the chance to do that with the ocean. And so I think that's where the curiosity like really started, of like, I understand a little bit about this. I've explored a little bit of this. I have no experience about this over here. And I think that just kind of like, I kind of gravitated more towards it because I didn't have anything to go off of. I was like, I wanted to learn more, having no experience. And so I think that that's kind of what pulled me to research the ocean.
Thanks. I feel like we're hitting questions unintentionally, but it's working out pretty great for us.
It's going good. It's going good.
We mentioned earlier that while you were in living in Arizona, you did an internship at the Odyssey Aquarium.
Yeah.
How was that? Like, how did it shape your understanding of marine science and your current research?
Yeah, I loved working at Odyssey. I will say, I always recommend, if you can avoid an unpaid internship, do it. Don't do the internship, find a paid one, because you should be paid for the work that you do. That being said, mine was unpaid. I was in a position to be able to afford to do an unpaid internship because I had support from my family. And I was nannying on the weekends. So, and that just covered gas. Like it was an hour drive to get there and then an hour drive to get home. It was a lot. And I was working 40 hours a week. But I was loving it. I was in love with this place. And so I got to work with, I was an aquarist intern. So I worked with the sea turtles and then anything with gills, except for the electric eel. Cause they're like, we're not going to let interns potentially get electrocuted and die from this eel. And I was like, that's smart. Because we were all like 18, 19, anyway. I absolutely loved it. I think that it shaped, my science, because I think it gave me my first like hands-on experience with marine organisms. And it also gave me, I guess, more context for how they exist, for lack of a better phrase, but let me explain that. It gave me more context for what they need to survive. So thinking of like the life support systems of like the water quality and how often we need to change the water and what pH level, what salinity, how often do we need to feed them? What is the feeding schedule? What organisms can you put in the same exhibit? And then also behavior of the organisms. So interactions of organisms of different species, interactions of organisms of the same species, behavior of organisms that are like in the same overall group, like two different species of ray. And then also looking at the variation of behavior of organisms within a single species. So for example, my intern project was to work with the guitarfish, which is a type of ray. I have them tattooed on my arm because I was absolutely obsessed with them. Guitarfish, their names were Fender, Gibson, and Kramer. I did not name them, but I love the names. But I target trained them basically to make it easier for aquarium staff to feed them. So you don't have to like chase them around the exhibit to try and give them food, making sure that they got their vitamins, and makes it a lot easier to do like tactile training with them so that you can work up to, like lifting them in and out of the water. If you need to do like an evaluation on them or a surgery or anything like that, that may come up. Target training, I think, is a really good way to start with some animals on how to just prepare them for life living in an aquarium. And so I was able to do that, and looking at the different behaviors of the three individuals of the same species. One of them was like super gung-ho and was like, I know what's happening. That's a target. That means food. I got this. And then one of the other ones was like really shy and was like, I'm wary of this. I don't think I like this. I'll come a little closer, but like, you're not getting me to touch that thing. I do not trust it. And so I think to be able to see just the different personalities of just the exact same species, and you all live in the same exhibit, you all have very similar experiences. It was just a really cool thing to be able to understand that, and then kind of be able to use that and translate it to my science now, of understanding that, like, while this tagged shark may have behaved this way, another one might behave a completely different way. So we need tons of tags out there to try and better understand like what is representative of the population's behavior and things like that. So and also it was just really fun because I was a desert girl and I was like, I get to feed sharks today. Like, it's Wednesday. Hooray, it's shark feed day. Like anything like that. And it helped with science communication too, because I had to do like a shark talk and like the piranha talk and the paddlefish talk and stand out there and, feed the animals, have people ask me questions of like, why do sharks not bite the divers when they're in the aquarium? I'm like, well, because they have no reason to. They're not provoked. Also, they're fed very well at the aquarium. And just answering questions like that and getting better at communicating science to people. That was like my first experience with both marine animals and also with science communication. And so I think that kind of, I don't think it started the interest, but it reignited it and showed me that this was something that I really wanted to do. And it was something that I could do because I was doing it, if that makes sense.
That it does make sense, and it kind of sparks like a few different questions in my head, but I'm going to try and be efficient because we are approaching the end. But so why did you decide to continue after? I assume like they offered you a job at some point because you were unpaid, like after you graduated and stuff.
Well, so I would have applied for a job, but
Mhm.
I had an internship I had an REU, research experience for
Oh, okay.
internship with Friday Harbor Labs out in Washington. And then from there, I got a lab tech position at Howard in DC. And then from there, I started grad school. So I kind of was just bouncing back and forth between the coasts a lot. I started grad school at the University of Washington before transferring back across the country over here again. So I've kind of just been everywhere. But I would have applied for a job if I hadn't already started down on like the research side of things, with that research experience for undergrads and then the lab tech position. But it was something I was interested in, and I think that I probably would have been able to get a job. They really liked me and I really liked them, and we jived really well together. But yeah, I just went off on a different path instead.
Do you feel like the experiences you have now and the current trajectory you're on, that you could see yourself being an aquarium?
Um, I don't think so, just because I think that there's so much more that I want to do. I think that if it were possible to do that and also do research and also do science communication, and also be able to like, eat, sleep, and interact with my family and friends, then like maybe I would do that, because it was a lot of fun. I really did enjoy it. I just think that the career goals that I currently have don't include that at the moment.
It looks like we have another chat question. How would you communicate your research to guests at the aquarium? You briefly mentioned that, but you want to go into more detail?
Sure. I guess I don't know if this is like a hypothetical, like if you were at an aquarium and you're doing research, how would you talk about that? I'll go with it that way, is how I'm interpreting that question. So I guess I've actually spoken with some people that, were associated with an aquarium before. Yes, hypothetical. Okay. I would, if possible, I would have slides. I think slides are very helpful just to show pictures to make it easier to understand, like, this is what a species distribution model looks like for a different species. I want to do something similar with this species, or this is what the tag looks like. But I do a lot of talking with my hands. So I feel like that helps when I don't have slides to be like, okay, so the tag works where you go like this and you put it on the fin. So it's just sitting like, and I talk with my hands a lot. So I think that helps with like the visual aspect of things. But I think that I would just, I guess just be myself about it. I feel very excited about my research. And people tend to have a lot of questions about it. And so I would happily answer, whatever questions I could with whatever knowledge I currently have. And if I ran into a question where it's like, I don't know the answer, I would be like, I don't know yet. And that's what I want to learn more about. And, just be as engaging as possible. I really like answering questions, and I really like when people seem to get excited about my research as well. So just, being excited about my research and talking about it with enthusiasm is just kind of the way that I would go about it. The same way I would go about science communication now.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I like that you mentioned visuals. Having pictures and stuff to show people like what's actually happening is always amazing.
Yeah.
I had this old PI that would always say like a picture's worth 1,000 words, but a video's worth like 1,000 pictures. And like I always include visuals because of that, because I realize people are way more engaged when they can actually see stuff outside of me just like saying this happened.
Yeah.
Same here. I mean, I do photography, so I try to include my own work in my presentations whenever I can, because I'm trying to presentations can get boring, so like I want people to not be bored and get more out of it. Yeah.
I like to add jokes into my science communication. Like when I'm presenting about research, I'm like, I don't want to be some like fuddy-duddy up here and just being like facts, figures, conclusions, acknowledgements. Like I think that like science is fun. That's why we all got into it. So why would you take the fun out of science? Like add a couple jokes in there, throw a meme on a slide. You know what I mean? Like I think one of the things when I was talking about I was talking about like a modeling paper where they were like modeling like species distribution model of like a dusky shark. I was like, yeah, now let's talk about modeling. And I changed the slide and it was a picture of runway models. It got a huge laugh. And then I was like, LOL, not that type of modeling. And then I moved on and then it was a species distribution model. But just to get people like, oh, LOL, there was a joke. I'm engaged now. I think it keeps people more engaged and it adds a little bit of fun to the situation. Like science is fun, but it can get boring and confusing if you don't keep people engaged. And I think that humor is a good way to keep people engaged.
Yeah, I think it works too because you're meeting people where they're at as well.
Yeah.
So like the more you're going off and off, you're kind of losing them. Like, yeah, they're going, but you kind of you're like, oh wait, yeah, no, she's with me. She gets me.
Yeah.
There's a question in the chat. This is from Tiara Moore. She asks, do you find your videos reach a certain age group or is it intergenerational? So demographics.
Oh, yeah. I feel like it's pretty intergenerational. I have had parents tell me, they're like, oh my gosh, I follow you because my kid loves science. And when I'm too overwhelmed to entertain them, I just hand them the phone with your Instagram and they just keep going. And I'm like, fantastic. But then I've had adults be like, wow, I learned something new today. This was super cool. And so I like that I'm able to reach so many different age groups because learning never stops. Like you are always learning throughout your entire life. And I think that as an adult to be able to learn something new or like find out about an animal that you didn't know existed, like that's one of the coolest things when you're a kid. You're like, oh my gosh, there's a sea unicorn called a narwhal. That's wild. So then as an adult to be able to be like, whoa, there's a fish called the sarcastic fringehead whose mouth like opens up like a Dilophosaurus or whatever. Like that's so cool. And so I love that I'm able to kind of help provide that feeling, not just for kids, but also for adults. And I like I've kind of said before, I love interacting with kids and teaching kids about science as well. And so being able to kind of get kids interested in science is really valuable. So I like that I'm able to reach a wide range of ages. Also, thanks for that question, Tiara. You're amazing.
And then we have another chat question. What are 3 action items you can leave with us today? This is kind of good for the end of the call too.
Action items. Number 1, I could say, evaluate your at-home practices in terms of sustainability. Now, I want to make it clear that the responsibility should not be on the consumer. It should absolutely be on the corporations to be more sustainable. How am I supposed to find a drink in a glass bottle if the only thing anyone's ever selling is drink in a plastic bottle? You know what I mean? But if you're able to do certain things like make smaller switches, like a reusable water bottle or like a bamboo toothbrush or whatever it is, or even like reusing the plastics that you already have. Like I know people that when they go to the store, they've got like these, they use the same like produce bags, the same plastic produce bags that they've had for like a year until it rips. And then they're like, I guess I'll just use a new one. And so they just use the new one until it rips. Smaller things like that. And not everyone can make all of these changes. Sometimes they're expensive. Sometimes it just doesn't work with the way that your life runs, and that's totally okay. But if there are smaller changes, you know, sometimes those smaller changes add up, and it also just makes me feel better about some of the things that I'm doing. Like I try my best. I've got a bunch of like I just bring silverware with me when I go, if I'm going to get takeout, so that I am not using like the plastic or whatever it is. So that's one smaller action item. Another one is if you're interested in science communication, get involved with science communication. You can do it in so many different ways. You can do it on social media. You can have like a scientific reading book club with your friends, and you can read scientific papers or like science heavy books. You could, if you're younger, like make like a fact sheet about your favorite animal and then like pin it to the walls of your school if you're allowed to do that. I always say there's no wrong way to communicate science as long as you're communicating accurate science. So just, you know, getting involved in whatever way you want to with science communication, I think is something that everyone can do. And then a third one is just maybe trying to stay up to date with what's going on in science. A lot of the science is, I think, very impactful for us to know. I think that it can help inform votes and policy decisions and things like that. So understanding like what's going on with wildlife, what's going on with plastic consumption, what's going on with like wildfires, and how can we fix that problem or alleviate it in some way or whatever it may be. And also just current events in general. I think those are things that are important to stay up to date on, just so that you are aware of what's going on, and then you can take action where you feel is needed or where you feel you can help. So I guess those would be my three action items. Yeah.
I think we're pretty much at time. Is that right?
Yeah, I can go ahead and wrap up if you want, or do you want to, Jamie?
You can do the first part. I'll do the second part.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jaida, so much for taking the time out of your evening to sit and chat with us and our community. We appreciate all that you do. And as we wrap up, we want to share a few answers we received regarding the importance of science communication. Again, we asked the community, why is science communication so important? And we received the following answers. 1, it helps people understand the world around them. Another one was that it builds trust in science and scientists. And it encourages participation in science, encourages people to want to, get involved and do things as a scientist maybe one day, or just to do like citizen science and not, make that their full job. All of those are really good answers, and I agree 100%. Did you have anything you want to add, Jamie?
The only thing I would add is also very important to follow sophistication on all socials. Because if you don't, then what are you doing?
Thank you. Appreciate it.
But yes, thank you, Jaida. Seriously, like this is great. And how can people connect with you other than following you on all socials?
Yeah, so I guess that would be the biggest one. Follow me on the socials. Instagram and Threads is sophistication_. Twitter and TikTok and Blue Sky, if you're on Blue Sky, is sophistication. You can also check out the Miss website and Miss socials. The Miss socials on like everything are Miss_Elasmo, ELASMO. And then also our website is misselasmo.org. If you're feeling generous, maybe donate a couple dollars, or just check out some of the programs that we have. Maybe someone, you or someone you're interested in, might be able to benefit from those. And our programs are free and funded. We want to make sure, again, we don't do unpaid internships. We want to make sure that people are either getting paid for their work or that we are paying for their travel if it's like a shorter trip or whatever it may be. All of our stuff is funded. So check us out.
Love to see it. Love to see it. And yeah, thanks again for participating in BIMS Dives. If you're watching, join us next month on Friday, November 24th for a special episode of BIMS Dives, all about the first inaugural in-person BIMS Week Professional Wellness Retreat. And if you're not registered, don't forget to register. I think there's still funding available to apply if you want to do that, and head to bims.org.